little dog. Two.
Hi, I'm Jane Rudolph.
And I'm Monsignor Charles Minor.
I'm Pat Shelton, and welcome to Reel to Reel.
We have an awful lot to do tonight, some wonderful things for you. Let's get right to it. I want to tell you about Father Bob Curtis, who's going to be with us on Reflections that talk about spiritual integration.
We're also going to have an opportunity tonight to rock and roll through the streets of Memphis and then take an unusual collision course with Father Bob Curtis. Stay with us.
And we're fast approaching the holiday season, and we're going to tell you about an organization that maybe not a lot of you have heard about, but who has been sharing the Spirit for a nice long time.
Sometimes when you say about holiday season coming along, you think of maybe, oh, it's just monotonous. Here it comes again. The day-to-day existence becomes a little tough and monotonous at times.
I think anything can come that way, especially when you see something like the news every single day. Sometimes it just gets to be a headline and then we forget about it. Until we get to know the people behind the news, we're going to vividly bring to you Father Lawrence Jenko, who was held captive for almost 2 years. And yet the legacy of those 564 days lives on.
On January 8, 1985, Father Lawrence Martin Jenko, who had headed Catholic relief services in Lebanon, was abducted by militant Shiite Muslims in Beirut.
One man said to me, "You are dead." And for the first time in my life, I looked into the eyes of hate.
For the first 6 months of his captivity, he was chained to a radiator with a plastic bag on his head. He lived in solidarity. Still, he endured the ordeal.
In order to survive that, I found that the nourishments were the nourishments of God's Word, the nourishment of Eucharist, and the nourishment of the other. And those are the three great nourishments that kept me going. I think then the other learning is the question of patience. You know, just be utterly patient and wait for the Lord. Death wasn't the big thing, you know. I was with the other Americans later in my captivity, 7 months into it, and then we talked about that. You know, death wasn't the big fear. It was day in, day out, you know, living in a closed room, 12 by 15 feet sealed, and to live one's existence like that for the rest of one's life was a great fear.
Father Jenko was held hostage for 564 days, but on July 26, 1986, his captors set him free.
I thank the CMW for the tremendous hospitality this day. I'm just so happy to be out on my way home. Well, that evening that I was set free, they came into the room and they said, "We're moving you to another prison." So we were to take nothing with us but our clothes. But I stashed the Bible between my shorts. And when I got up to leave, they said, "Sit down." And so when I got up to leave again, they said, "Sit down." And so I was the last one in the room. And once again, I stood up and they said, "We told you to sit down." So I sat down and Hodge was there, the man in charge, and I said, "Are you going to kill me?" And he said, "No, you're going to go home." The men we weren't changed to another prison. They were across the way, and David Jacobson was making that videotape that I carried out.
The videotape from David Jacobson warned that he and his fellow captives face execution from the Muslim kidnappers.
And that our release will be by death if the government doesn't negotiate right now.
Terry Anderson, a couple months before I was released, he said, "Marty, promise me something. Promise me I will not be forgotten. Please, dear God, set them free. It's been 5 years now. Set them free." When in captivity, they'd ask me, "Is there anything you want?" And I said, "Yes, I want a taxi cab to go home." On that morning of my release, as I sat on the little dirt hill there, they dumped me off. Because I had been beneath a truck for all those hours, taped like a mummy, and I survived that. And I sat there and I said, "You're not to move for 15 minutes, and I'm still blindfolded, but over my head they said, 'Here, Abuna, take this.' and they handed me 5 Lebanese pounds. And they said, catch your taxi cab and go home.
Every day, Father Jenko speaks on behalf of the American hostages. He would like to see all of them set free out of love, not hate and destruction.
Yeah, I was in Washington, D.C., and when the news broke on the Iran-Contra scandal, and I was there to do a promotion for children, sending love letters, American children sending love letters to the children of Lebanon. And what happened was that morning the news broke, and the cameras moved their focus from the children to me, and they said, Father Jenko, what do you think about, that they were selling arms to you? And I thought, good grief, to sell arms to a warring nation like Iran, to keep a war going on between brother nations, Iran and Iraq, and then it's found out later there's a spin-off on these arms. They made money to bring that violence to the Middle East to Central America. So innocent men, women, children died to secure the release of one American, Martychenko. You live with that and you say, please don't ever do that again. It's horrendous, it's immoral, it's sinful, stop it. There was an interesting thing that happened to me, and it must have been about 3 months prior to my own release. Little Saeed, who had been with me most of my 19 months, he said, Abuna, which means dear father, he said, do you remember those first 6 months? And I said, yes, Saeed, I do, with tremendous sadness and grief for what you did to me, what you did to my brothers. And he said, Abuna, do you forgive me? I was really shocked by the question because I leaned against the wall and I'm blindfolded. I can never look into his eyes. And I said, Saeed, you know what? I need to speak to God first. You see, as a Christian, I'm not supposed to hate you. I'm supposed to love you no matter what. And there are times, Saeed, I hated you. And I was filled with anger against you. And I need also to ask God's forgiveness for not loving you as I was supposed to love. And I also need to ask your forgiveness too, Saeed. Do you forgive me? And it was a marvelous evening of reconciliation. So in all things, I believe that in order to be set free, you have to forgive. If you look at, the world that you and I live in, there's so much violence in the world, and how do you respond to violence is our motivational factor always to respond with violence with violence? Is there any other way that we could change the world that you and I live in to be a world of peace? Does it always have to be the violent response to that? So then I'd pull forth from the non-believer, what's your answer to the world that you and I live in, to bring about peace in the Middle East, to bring about peace in the world? And I suppose you'd have to then touch into, our commonness as earthlings. And we want this world to be a place that's safe and secure and at peace for all men, women, children, no matter what persuasion. There's still Americans who are there as if, they're forgotten, as if the hostages, the American government says, we have devalued them. How do you devalue a human person, So you keep reminding them they are our brothers and we want them home. It's simple as that. And we constantly pray for them. People say, prayer is not going to work. Believe me, prayer is going to work.
Father Jenko and the powerful impact of prayer.
As you wait with us now, say with Father Jenko, dear God, please set them free.
What can you do about AIDS?
Love is what we need. The life that love can bring.
Now we're almost into the holidays. And as you know, Jesus is the reason for the season. But the giving and receiving of gifts is not to be, well, poo-pooed. Lots of people enjoy the season even more because of the giving and receiving of gifts. But unfortunately, there are many families who don't have this joy to look forward to. Today we're going to talk with a lady whose agency sees to it that needy families can enjoy the season as much as any of us. And my guest today is Pat Langan. Pat Langan, first let me tell you, I've never met a Pat that I didn't like. Pat to Pat. So happy to have you here.
Thank you.
And Pat is the Executive Director of Catholic Social Services in the Diocese of Camden. Pat, you have a lovely program over there in Camden Diocese that I'd like you to tell us about.
Well, at this time of the year, we call our program Sharing the Spirit, because people donate clothing and toys primarily for children, and we distribute them among the various counties of the diocese through our Catholic Social Services outreach offices. In the main office where I am, we will have a distribution on the 14th and 15th of December, and the people will come and choose the gifts that they want to give their children. We don't wrap them. We let the parents come in and choose 2 gifts for each child and various items of clothing that would be appropriate for their children, and then they take them home and wrap them and give them to the children. It makes them feel as if they went and purchased them somewhere, and they seem to like it better because they see what they're getting for the children rather than being given a package that's already wrapped by someone else and they don't know what's in it.
Yeah, it feels as though they selected it.
That's right.
More than just, here's something somebody gave you, take what you
Yes.
get. Yeah, that's a nice, unique touch. Now, I understand this program, Sharing the Spirit, has been going on for some time, but you don't publicize it a great deal. How long has the program been in existence?
Well, it's been in existence as long as Catholic Social Services has been around. We don't have to publicize, really. We're small, and the parishes are aware of our needs, and many of them donate things at Christmas. And we get monetary donations from organizations, and the money is usually earmarked for children for Christmas or clothing or toys, and that's what we use it for. We spend every cent they give us, and we give out every toy that has been donated to us.
So the gifts just come.
That's right. God is good to us.
So today isn't necessarily a solicitation of gifts. We just would like the Delaware Valley and southern New Jersey to know of your existence. Let's see, now how is eligibility determined for the families who receive the gifts?
Well, many of the people are on welfare, or some of them are people who have been caught between the cracks. They don't qualify for welfare, but they really don't have any money to spend on the families for Christmas. And no one likes to see a child do without gifts at Christmas. So some of them are referred to us by other agencies. Many of them come just by word of mouth. And we're not too hard on the eligibility at Christmas time. We don't push it.
If they're not referred and an individual family would like to apply for these gifts, what should they do? Contact your office?
Yes, and we will make an appointment for them to come and choose the gifts. As I say, we give them a time on those 2 days, on the 14th and 15th of December.
Well, that's coming up really
Right.
fast. 14th and 15th of December for
That's
distribution of the Sharing the Spirit program, sponsored by the Camden Diocese Catholic Social Services.
That's correct.
Pat, I want to thank you so much for coming today to tell us about the program, and I'm hoping that you'll get more contributions than you ever got. I guess you would like non-perishable foods?
That's right.
New clothing and new toys.
Unwrapped.
Unwrapped.
Yes.
Okay, thanks so much for being
You're
with us
welcome.
today.
Thank you for having me.
Unfortunately, gifts or no gifts, there will be more families than we care to know that will not enjoy the season, primarily because of the collapse of marriages and the resulting fatherlessness. Well, today, Dr. Richard Fitzgibbons has advice for men from divorced families.
Today, many mental health professionals like myself are seeing increasing numbers of young men who are in our offices because of problems that develop as a result of divorce. We have in our society an epidemic of fatherlessness caused by the collapse of marriages. There's been a radical change in our society in the last 20 years with the collapse of marriages. In many schools today, 30 to 50% of the children are from single-parent families. This has an overwhelmingly powerful impact upon these youngsters, especially upon the males who don't have a father with them. Many of these males develop significant problems in school, at home, in work, and in their relationships. Recently, there was a book published called Second Chances, which is the longest-term study of the effects of divorce on young people. I'd like to share with you some of the conclusions from that book. First, many of these young people have serious long-term problems in trusting. They're afraid of committing themselves to anything or anyone. Why is this? Well, it's because they felt abandoned when they were young, and that has produced within them a terrible fear of being abandoned, which causes them to pull back and makes them afraid to give themselves fully. Secondly, there's the wound of loneliness and inner emptiness that many of them try to escape from through sex or drugs or alcohol. Thirdly, there's a terrible feeling of insecurity. Several times I felt almost heartbroken seeing a youngster sit in my office saying that it was his fault that his father left, or that it's his fault that his father doesn't call him. Now clearly it isn't his fault, but youngsters idealize their fathers and then blame themselves for this difficulty. Another major symptom is denied anger. This anger with a father who isn't there goes underground and is then misdirected at school, at home, at work. Also, frequently, there's deep anger at God, like, why did God let this happen to me? Fortunately, certain steps can be taken to resolve this wound of fatherlessness. It's important to try to get these fathers who aren't with their children to spend quality time with them and to communicate with them regularly. Secondly, it's important not to let these young people misdirect their anger. It's important to tell them that you are angry with your father. Don't take it out on me. I don't deserve it. You've got to learn to forgive your father. That can be very difficult. That forgiveness can be almost impossible, in fact. They may need to just say, God, you forgive him. I can't right now. Thirdly, it's important to help these people learn to trust people. You see, they're afraid to trust people. They're so afraid of being abandoned. Some of these people can use the spiritual side of their personality here and think, Lord, help me feel safe with people, because that's what's missing, a feeling of being safe. To overcome the insecurity, it can be helpful to communicate to them that you are loved and that you are lovable. Now, these wounds take time to heal, so we need to be very patient in dealing with these deep wounds. Finally, I am comforted and encouraged by the words of the psalmist who says, Yahweh will father the fatherless.
When problems are difficult to discuss, such as alcoholism or divorce, we have Dr. Richard Fitzgibbons here to give us a helping hand.
And a helping hand is what we'll need from now on to do some combinations, so why don't you stay with us?
Lies beget lies.
God, you sound like Mother.
Well, she happens to be right. Lying is a vicious circle and there's no way out except to tell the truth.
It's not so easy this time, Maureen. If I tell you, it's just gonna make it bad.
1 out of every 5 people who try cocaine get hooked. But that's not your problem. Or is it?
So how old did you say this stuff was? It belonged to my great-grandparents. It's almost 100 years old. Look at this one. Oh, that's the bomb.
That was something real bad, wasn't it?
Sarah, could this thing kill us? Oh, no. All of the people got together last century and got rid of all of the bombs, and there aren't any left.
Let's give the future back to the children.
We welcome your comments and suggestions and encourage you to write us at Reel to Reel, 222 North 17th Street, room 907, Philadelphia 19103, or call us during regular business hours at 215-668-9842.
Did you ever wonder why they call this a magazine show? Well, basically because we have different articles or stories and many unusual combinations.
Well, let's put this combination together. Everything's going to be all right, but then you have to realize things have to go face to face. So now, why don't you go face to face with us with Reverend Al Green and Father Bob Curtis.
Don't you ever go astray. Trust in God's word and believe it, 'cause it'll never pass away. We'll see him in his glory, riding on the clouds of joy, greeting us with open arms and peace forevermore. I know that everything is gonna be alright. He's coming back, like he said he would. Yeah, it's gonna be alright. He's coming back for the true and good. Now when the sky is darkened, there won't be no moonlight. We'll know that time has finally come, and he'll change the wrong to right. So if you're always searching, trying to find the bottom line, just give your love and life to God. He'll give you peace of mind. I know that everything is gonna be alright. He's coming back, like he said he would. I said, yeah, it's gonna be alright. He's coming back, oh yeah, for the true and good. Play it. He's coming back, just like he said he would. Yeah, it's gonna be alright. He's coming back for the true and good. I wanna be ready, got to be ready. I wanna be ready, got to be ready. Ready for the peace of love and happiness is coming back. Like he said he would. Oh, you're ready for peace of love and happiness is coming back for the true and good. We know he's the beginning, and we know he is the end. And there's no one that's better when you really need a friend. So don't you ever worry, 'cause he gave the guarantee that he'll return to take us home and fulfill the prophecy. I know that everything is gonna be alright. He's coming back, he said he would. Get ready for the peace of love and happiness. I know he's coming back, just like he said he would. Oh yeah, and love and happiness. I know he's coming back.
From the infant beginning of Jesus, Scripture moves very quickly to encounter the irresistibly mature Jesus. And his irresistibility is shown when he invited Andrew and his friends to come and see where he lived and then stay with him. Well, they did. They stayed with him until the going got rough. We have the same problem. It's easy to hold the infant Jesus in our arms, but it's even easier to hold the adult Jesus at arm's length, because the adult Christ makes demands on us. That's what I would call the spiritual problem of integration. It's just easier if we keep Jesus segregated. It's easier to keep him in his Sunday place because we don't live there. It's easier to visit him on Sundays than to live with him all week long. That's difficult. But why can't we? Why can't we integrate him into each day, each hour, each moment even? As human beings, even in relating to other human beings, we have the same problem. We behave differently face to face than when we're removed from each other, when there's some kind of distance between us. Look, it's easier to drop a bomb than to engage in hand-to-hand combat. It's easier to be aggressive on the telephone than it is face to face. It's easier to be hateful in our automobiles than eye to eye. Let me tell you a story about that. A long time ago, I was 16 years old, I just got my driver's license, and I approached an intersection at the same time as another car. And I know that I had the right of way. The other car tried to take the right of way, and I kept going. The other car kept going. One of us had to stop, and I was in one of those righteous driver's rages, and part of me hoped the other car would hit me so I'd be free to take revenge. And the other car slowed at the very last moment, but its driver was also enraged, ready for mayhem. He tailgated me, honking with fury. I honked back, wishing I had a rear-mounted cannon like James Bond so I could blow him off the face of the earth. Finally, I stopped my car in such a way as to block the other car. I got out ready and willing and anxious for battle. Trouble was, as I drew face to face with the villainous driver of the adversary car, I saw he was an old man with an old lady passenger. And he looked a little bit like my grandmother, and she looked, or he looked like my grandfather, and she looked like my grandmother. You know something? He was my grandfather. And she was my grandmother. And I embraced them. How could this be? Since when we were anonymous in our automobiles, I'd been ready to ram their car to kingdom come. Face to face, it's always a different story. Do we act the same way with God? If you're searching for a way to get face to face with God, you might try the Mass. God bless you.
I've been an Al Green fan since his first big record, Let's Stay Together, but I never thought I'd live to see the day to see his music video on Reel to Reel.
Pat, you played that on the radio, right?
Oh,
when
yes,
you were a DJ.
with pleasure.
Yes. See, that means Pat's a multimedia person. That's what it means. And so is Father Bob Green. Some of you might recognize him from one of the nighttime soap operas. He makes guest appearances, and I just read he often comes on set once a week to say Mass in the dressing rooms, which is nice.
I mean Bob Curtis.
Bob Curtis, Bob Green.
See,
Well, you just make
that's it. You have
that's
to watch
combination,
out.
right?
Well, that's it. Because the man who's riding behind you might be your grandfather, so look out.
Oh, no. As long as it's not you, Monsignor, I'll be okay. Until next week, please take care.
Goodbye. God bless you.
Good night.
Travel arrangements for Reel to Reel by Atkinson and Mullen, Newtown Square, PA, 215-359-5980.